Doom 3 is a first-person shooter action horror game created by id Software back in 2004. Despite carrying the number 3 in its title, Doom 3 is a reimagining of its 1993 predecessor and delivers a great science fiction horror experience with very few flaws.
We better move.
As someone who regards only a few games as my favorite, I'm happy to report that Doom 3 is one of them. However, my first impression of the game was not positive. I actually loathed the experience and initially had written it off as too dark and repetitious. It would be only until 2019 that I would give the game a second chance, and I'm really glad I did. The game grew on me and sported the type of gameplay I really enjoyed. A beautiful narrative-driven experience in the same vein as Half-Life and BioShock. Although I do understand and sympathize with many fans who dislike how different this game is to the originals, Doom 3 is still an excellent game that has been recognized as one of the best horror shooters ever. Set in the year 2145, Doom 3's story begins with a Dark Star space shuttle arriving at the Mars research base of the Military Industrial Supercorporation, the Union Aerospace Corporation, or simply UAC for short. Disembarking the shuttle is UAC's Elliot Swan and his bodyguard Bruce Campbell, who have been sent from the company's board of directors to investigate the inside claims and increasing accidents occurring at the Mars base under the direction of Dr. Malcolm Totally Not Evil Betruger.
Even these few accidents could have been avoided.
Behind them is our player character, a nameless and voiceless space marine who ends up joining at the worst or best times depending on your perspective. After eavesdropping on the growing tension between both parties, the player is briefed by Sergeant Thomas Sarge Kelly and sent to rescue a missing scientist located deep within an old section of the research base. Not long after traveling through some spooky metal corridors, the missing scientist is finally found and interrupted during his attempt to contact outside authorities on Dr. Betruger's evil undertakings. However, things suddenly begin to go haywire and all hell breaks loose. As one of the last remaining survivors of the demonic invasion, you must fight through the infested Mars base and close the portal linking to the nightmarish landscapes of hell. The story of Doom 3 is a mixture of science fiction with a whole lot of horror drenched on top. Although some may not consider storyline in a Doom game necessary, Doom 3 does offer an enjoyable and well-detailed adventure with enough blood to quench any horror fan's thirst. What contributes to Doom 3's story being great is not so much the plot, but rather how incredibly well it communicates its narrative. Instead of relying only on cutscenes to tell the story, the game also makes use of various scripted events, its beautifully crafted environment, and its System Shock-like PDA system. The Personal Data Assistants, or PDAs, are the many collectible handhelds found throughout the invasion-stricken base. They often include audio and email logs, granting not only level progression, but also backstory and a tremendous number of codes to access goodie-filled lockers. However, the PDAs won't be the only story commodity, as the level themselves house many large story pieces and many small clever details that only keen observers will find. As mentioned earlier, Doom 3 does sport a small cast of distinct and well voice-acted characters. Unfortunately, while they do receive a satisfying amount of backstory found within the PDAs, the characters only have a few entertaining moments in the experience and lack a fulfilling ending.
I think I do understand.
Okay, plan B.
This goes for the main character also, as he isn't given any explanation for his demon butt-kicking capabilities or history at all. Though, to its credit, the game does attempt to offer a couple twists, but sadly they never materialize and end up being a red herring of sorts. Apart from the characters lacking satisfying arcs, the only other gripe I have with the story is its conclusion. Without spoiling too much, Doom 3's ending feels abrupt and underwhelming for an otherwise enjoyable experience. The final boss battle is a bit anticlimactic due to how easy he is to defeat, and the game ends much faster than it started, resulting in little to no consequence besides granting humanity enough corpses to fertilize crops for the next couple of decades. By no means do these grievances ruin the story, but leave more to be desired on an otherwise decently written narrative. Moving on to the gameplay, Doom 3 is an action-packed, horror-driven experience with a strong narrative and polished level design. Equipped with an assortment of weaponry, the player will be tasked to travel across the Mars base to Hell and back, completing objectives while battling against hordes of Hell's finest. In many ways, Doom 3 is very similar to its predecessors. You kill demons, explore for ammo, and find the level exit, rinse and repeat. But where Doom 3 is different is in its details. The enemies in Doom 3 are mostly familiar demons from prior games and behave near identical to their old counterparts. To name a few, the Cacodemon, Revenant, and Pinky Demon are all back and in many cases are more powerful than before. But do come in less numbers compared to the previous games. Doom 3 also introduces several new demons, with the most notable of them being the Trite, Cherub, and Tentacle Commando. Similar to the Lost Soul, the Trite are relatively weak and come in packs. These spider-like creepy crawlies are the most recognizable of the new bunch and cause not only an increase of arachnophobia, but also in raid sales online. The Cherub is the next new demon and is by far the most repulsive of them all. These half-baby, half-fly abominations are truly the most visually and audibly disturbing enemies I've ever witnessed. Whenever they make their noises, I'll immediately search for them to slay just to stop my ears from vomiting. The last new demon is the Tentacle Commando, which is technically a commando or chain gunner without the chain gun. This demon is the most irritating addition, as he will rush and slap the player with his seemingly 15-foot long tentacle arm. Due to his speed and large health pool, this whiplash attack will become a frequent terror for new players. But there is hope, as ducking at the correct time will save the player from being hit. Most of the time. For the most part, the new demons are welcomed, as they fit the Doom 3's aesthetic perfectly and do offer more variety in the weaker pool of enemies. Like the demons, almost all the weapons from the original Doom game, except the Super Shotgun, return in Doom 3. They function as expected, but are somewhat different from their past incarnations. The reason is due to the need of reloading this time around, meaning old strengths like the chain gun monster lock and endless rocket launcher fire are things of the past. The most polarizing of these differences is to the beloved shotgun. In the original Doom games, the shotgun was by far the most versatile weapon in the player's arsenal. It could kill numerous weaker enemies in a single pump and peg enemies from a distance. Simply put, it was the bread and butter of the original Doom Marine. However, now in Doom 3, the shotgun is no longer the jack of all trades. Not only does it have to reload, but its pellet spread is significantly larger, meaning anything beyond a few feet will most likely miss and result in the player getting a big old demon hug. In order to be effective with the shotgun, the player must get very close to ensure all of the shotgun's pellets make contact with an enemy. At first this may seem risky, but with enough practice the shotgun will become a frequent use against the smaller demons. Heck, if you get good enough, Tentacle Commandos, Revenants, and even Arch-Viles are capable of dying from a couple blasts from the shotgun. The only other original weapon worth mentioning is the Plasma Rifle. It's by far the most satisfying weapon to use in Doom 3. The design, handling, and sound effects all contribute to making the Plasma Rifle a real treat to use, as well as its effectiveness against the more powerful enemies. Together with the original weapons are several new weapons introduced in Doom 3. The machine gun is the middle ground between the shotgun and the chain gun, offering accuracy but at the expense of damage and fire rate. I frequently found myself using it for attacking enemies at a long range, and also to deal with packs of trites. Aesthetically, the machine gun is a well-designed weapon, and even features a monitor displaying its ammo count on the weapon itself. This ammo display is pretty neat, and it will be also found on the Plasma Rifle, Chain Gun, and BFG weapons. The grenade is useful enough, and able to kill multiple of the weaker demons in a single explosion, but should be used carefully as it seems to be coated in whatever Flubber was made out of. Without revealing too much, the Soul Cube is important to the story, but in terms of the gameplay, once the player has killed 5 demons, it can be used to kill any enemy in a single hit, and grant a certain pool of health back to the player depending on the size of the monster. The Soul Cube is featured in the later part of the game, and is basically Arch-Vile and Hell Knight repellent. Now, the biggest addition in Doom 3 is the flashlight. The environments in Doom 3 are bathed in darkness, and require the use of the flashlight in order to navigate. The catch is, the player cannot use the flashlight and a weapon at the same time, thus forcing the player to choose between visibility or safety. This new mechanic is very polarizing to some, causing fans to either swear by or against its existence. For the beginning parts of Doom 3, the flashlight is beautifully incorporated into the gameplay and level design. Later on in the game, you'll find that the flashlight does overstay its welcome, as the player becomes less frightened and more comfortable. This ultimately leads to the loss of the flashlight's extended purpose of invoking fear into the player, and simply becomes a means in order to see. This doesn't mean the flashlight is a hindrance or annoyance to use once the scare factor of Doom 3 lessens, but it does make one wonder if the UAC base had any rope or duct tape lying around. In terms of level design, the levels themselves are pretty enjoyable, and in many times look great. They also display a high degree of polish and effort, meaning bugs are nearly non-existent, and level progression is rarely unclear. Additionally, Doom 3's levels are logical and have purpose to its world, rather than being strictly a canvas for death and destruction. Occasionally the player will come across surviving UAC personnel who not only provide story-related information, but also health, ammunition, and in rare cases, to help in progression.
What was that? Stay close.
Along with these personnel are the mini sentry bots who honestly could clean up the entire demon invasion by themselves. Besides shooting enemies, Doom 3 does incorporate basic puzzle solving and frequent platforming, and various secrets that don't require humping walls to find. Another old staple from Doom's past is monster closets, but are thankfully well integrated into Doom 3 and not at all overdone. Another notable feature are the many interactable displays found throughout the experience. These displays are used for various purposes like unlocking doors, putting in codes to open lockers, and camera systems. A major critique to Doom 3's level design is its lack of environment variety. Most of the experience is confined within the metal interior of the UAC base and rarely ventures outside of it. When the player does get the opportunity to traverse the Martian terrain, it's a pretty short experience as the outdoor areas are not that big. To make matters worse, the player also has a limited supply of air, meaning he or she must collect oxygen canisters found across the Martian landscape in order to not suffocate. This oxygen requirement ultimately makes the few outdoor sections even shorter, thus destroying any sort of environment variety early on in Doom 3. On the other hand, the Hell and Cavern landscapes do accomplish what the Martian outdoor sections could have, but are unfortunately featured in the later half of the game. Another critique, or more of an annoyance, is Doom 3's infrequent autosave system, or lack thereof. Dying, then having to reduce sizable portions of already experienced gameplay is irritating to say the least. Coupled with this are the frequent pounce-ready imps awaiting behind many doors. The last critique is to the armor system in Doom 3. Traditionally, armor soaks up most damage, leaving the player's health more or less intact. But for Doom 3, the armor only receives a third of the damage, meaning the player's health will be taking most of the brunt. It's a bit of an odd choice, especially when armor is much more abundant than health throughout the levels. Despite these minor complaints, Doom 3's gameplay is still very enjoyable, and can easily overshadow most negatives. Although being over 15 years old, Doom 3 remains as one of the best looking and sounding games ever made. This is thanks to its impressive dynamic lighting system and excellent ambient soundtrack. The atmosphere throughout the experience is nothing short of superb and easily absorbs the player into its haunting world. As expected from older titles, the textures and various models are a bit dated by today's standards, but are not hard to overlook due to how beautiful they look together. The art style of Doom 3 is good, but always reminds me of that early 2000s futuristic depiction. But this may be due to the Doom movie that was released over a year later, including some elements from the game.
Semper Fi, motherfucker!
As for the monster redesigns, most are well designed and faithful enough to their source material. The only demon design that I dislike is the Pinky Demon. Despite him being a popular and recognizable design in Doom 3, I really dislike his appearance of half bulldog with a hood of foreskin. Plus, he's far too large for most smaller areas, thus delegating him to a more infrequent role rather than his original role of being a meat shield between you and an imp. I think it would have been better for his design to be used for an altogether different enemy, but it is what it is. Apart from the visuals and audio, the game does perform well on modern systems, with all the settings cranked to the max. However, due to its age, the game lacks many features like widescreen and controller support, FOV sliders, and unlocked high frame rate options. On the plus side though, there are source ports of Doom 3 available to download that introduce widescreen support with improved compatibility. Most of the footage in this review is using a source port with widescreen enabled, and it runs flawlessly. Another way to play Doom 3 is with the Doom 3 BFG edition. Released in 2012, the BFG edition not only improves the graphics and audio fidelity, but also includes all the aforementioned missing features, along with Steam achievements, a better autosave system, the first 2 Doom games, Doom 3's expansion pack Resurrection of Evil, and the Lost Mission levels. Although all these additions are great, there are a few problems with the BFG edition. First, the BFG edition removes a flashlight and replaces it with a shoulder-mounted one, thus removing the flashlight mechanic altogether. This new flashlight does have a limited time use though, and requires a short recharge time. The second issue is with the increased health and ammo pickups, making the experience more forgiving. The last issue has to do with the overall increase of lighting throughout the game, resulting in the environments not being as dark as before. The only issue that bothers me of the 3 is the flashlight, as the BFG edition should have had an option to choose between a handheld or shoulder-mounted one to cater to both diehard fans and newcomers alike. Despite all these issues, I do prefer the BFG edition as my favorite way to experience Doom 3. The unlocked frame rate alone is an incredible addition, with controller support as a close second. However, for the first time players, I'd recommend playing the original Doom 3 using a source port, just to experience the game as it was on its release date. Although it may not have been what fans were expecting or hoping for, Doom 3 is still a fantastic game in its own right. Everything from its top-notch presentation, expanded story, and its action-packed gameplay was clearly given a great deal of effort and love by its developers. Doom 3 can be finished within 8 to 12 hours of gameplay depending on difficulty, and is absolutely worth a few playthroughs. As mentioned earlier, Doom 3 does have an expansion pack named Resurrection of Evil and a level pack exclusive to the BFG edition called the Lost Missions that continue the Doom 3 storyline, but that will be a review for another time. For now, give Doom 3 a go and kick some demon butt.